Hi, this is Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about the direwolf combat. So within the Drudigar VidQuest, of course, there is the direwolf named Drudigar, who is Lag's mount. And this is talking specifically about the combat between the player characters and the direwolf Drudigar. Just giving you some details so that you can run that combat the way it should be run. All right, so one thing you need to determine is where the combat is going to happen. The combat will happen in one of three places, and that position will be completely determined by how much the players drove to get to Drudigar in time, okay? Now, what do I mean by that? Drove to get to Drudigar in time. What I mean by that is, like, for instance, did they say, we're gonna push even to the point where we might take fatigue because we've been pushing so much. When they come across different locations along their path, right? And you say, okay, you can follow around, and if you go 3/4 of a mile up to the left, there you get the idea that there will be a place where you can pass over fallen trees rather than going through an icy cold river with your horses and yourself and getting wet, right? So if they make sacrifices to make sure that they're getting to Drudigar as close, as fast as possible, you want to honor that by giving them better position to fight Drudigar, the direwolf. And so here's the three positions. They can fight him in the forest. And actually, this is to their advantage, okay? So, so basically, the reason that this is to their advantage is, one, it will be, the biggest reason why this is to their advantage is, it'll be before Drudigar really has the opportunity to reach anyone, okay? So if the player characters reach Drudigar in the forest, he will have killed 0 people, okay? The next place that they can find Drudigar, the next position, if they were slower, would be at the edge of 6 bells, okay? Now, if they're at the edge of 6 bells, they will find the bodies of 2 fallen woodcutters. 2, okay? And basically at this point, they will be fighting in an open space where they can be seen by people in 6 bells, okay? And the people in 6 bells can run to them and may aid them, but and if that happens, there will only be maybe 1 or 2 woodcutters that'll be able to get there in time. They'll throw an axe chop or something. At best, they're going to do 1d6 or 2d6 damage. It's really going to kind of be negligible from a damage to Drudigar perspective, but it will be meaningful to the player characters in that Drudigar will actually attack. So Drudigar's splits will then be attacked between the player. His attacks will be split between the player characters and the non-player characters, which means it should be easier for them to take him down because Drudigar is going to be putting less attacks on them. Okay. All right, and that should make a good group of heroes. That should make those player characters fight harder to stop Drudigar from harming the woodcutters. They may even call the woodcutters off and shout out and say, "No, don't come over here. We'll handle this." So it all depends on how they handle it. So just wanted to give you a heads up. The last place that the player characters can fight Drudigar is directly in 6 bells. So this is, they talked a really long time with White, and they really didn't push themselves, and maybe they even took time to accomplish other goals or things like that. If the players are dragging their feet, then at that point, they will encounter Drudigar in 6 bells. And at this point, he will have killed 2d6 villagers, okay? All right, so at that point, now you understand where they're going to fight him, okay? When he fights them, he will essentially he will always fight in the same ways. So I already did a full video on what runes actually affect, what wards actually affect Drudigar. So he has magical spells that have permanency on him, and so you know what he's capable of from a separate video. But I want to talk about how he'll actually fight. So his fighting method is pretty much always the same. He's smart. Drudigar is very, very smart. Okay, direwolves themselves in their native habitat are incredibly deadly hunters, and they're very clever, right? But this is a direwolf that was raised by, who at the end of his career, he was a 20th level wizard. So Drudigar is crazy smart, and he's very, very dangerous. So he will use his smartness to use any type of, now there actually won't be, essentially the fight, in the first two positions, the fight will just essentially be out. Well, the first position is he's in a forest, so he can't. But he's not going to fight defensively, so he's not going to use any of the trees to hide behind. And then in the second position as well, Drudigar will really also fight specifically in a manner that fits the following way. He will bite, claw, kill, move. Okay, he will bite and claw, and if he has not killed that target, he will continue to bite and claw that target until it's killed, and then he'll move. Okay, so that's the way that Drudigar specifically fights. When he is in the city, he will continue to go after essentially villagers who will have very little ability to stop him from killing them. But when the player characters start to deal any significant damage, I'm talking like 2d6 or above, he will shift from the villagers to the player characters, and he'll use the same method of bite, claw, kill, move. He'll bite, claw, kill one of the player characters, and then move to another player character. Okay, and so just remember that's essentially how he'll fight. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, how do the player characters actually beat him? So one, just to be clear, and I wanted to call this out, basically, I trust player characters, right? So, and so one of the things that you should be careful about is, Drudigar was built to be dangerous, not necessarily to be beat, all right? So the player characters, if one of them are going to fall, you don't need to say this to them, but you do need to communicate that he's an incredibly deadly beast. And so you should understand that it's completely within the sphere of this, that 1 to even a third of the player characters will die fighting Drudigar. This is built to be a memorable event. And the other issue is they can run. Like if the player characters really feel, hey, we got a guy with we got 2 people with 1 hit point each, and all our spells are gone, we're gonna leave. That's what happens sometimes, So just to be clear, this was not built. Drudigar was built to kill player characters, not be beat by them. So just be aware of that, right? He is actually a very deadly foe. All right. So with all that said, some of the ways that he can be beaten, I have run this before for player characters, and one of the most innovative ways I've ever seen that he was beat was that he was levitated. Once Drudigar is off of his feet, he is much less of a dangerous. He's much less dangerous. And you can do what you can to, he becomes much less of a combatant if he's levitated and he can't get any traction, okay? The other issue, there's a few other things. So one, how can the player characters actually beat him? Now, notice I said beat, right? Well, one way is to kill him, right? Now, they all promised Lig, that, Lig asked for their promise that they would not harm Drudigar, and they would protect Drudigar from being harmed, okay? But the reality is the player characters may not be able to do that. It might be beyond their capabilities. So they may choose to take that direwolf's life, okay? If that is the case, of course there'll be one last tear shed in Drudigar's eyes for his life with Lig and the fact that, his life had to end this way. In addition to that, he can, the next one is he can be captured, right? So player characters can lure him into a pit, or they can net him, right? All kinds of different ways that they can capture him with mundane items, right? And like lift him up in a net, or anything like that. So it's another way that they can handle him, right? There's one more way. A handle animal at a DC 20, right? will actually make him calm and actually will remind him of his training. Okay. Now, one thing that you need to do though is they should have to take an entire round to even position, to get somebody into position, right? And that person should, it should be animal handling, right? And also, so basically, generally, you're going to have anybody with an Outlander background or a Druid should be able to make this check, okay? But they're going to have an entire round where they get that character into position, and then also, if that character fails, they will most likely, and the other thing is, they have to be within 10 feet to do this. They can't do this any farther away than 10 feet, okay? And then, if that fails, Drudigar should be given an immediate attack, okay? So this is essentially gives an attack of opportunity for Drudigar, all right? So just be aware of that. And also, this should only happen once, because the reason why is once Drudigar somebody's tried an animal handling on him, it'll make him even more enraged, okay? And you should and so it'll make him even more enraged. And so just be aware of that. So he will not respond well to a failed animal handling check. Okay. So those are all the different ways that Drudigar can be processed. Those are the positions where your player characters will fight Drudigar. Thank you.